Hello. Right. Okay, so testing before we start. 10 minutes in. If you've tuned in already, bear with me a minute. A lot of tech stuff to work through. So, let me get rid of my little picture. Should hopefully now be able to see me and hear me. I'll wait for my two guys to confirm that. Whilst it's catching up, so there's going to be a little bit of a delay, I will start going on Logic, playing stuff, seeing if it works. Then at 6 o'clock we'll get started. So, right, let me try this. So now I'm going to do display capture. Go to here. Oh, let me get rid of my face cam, which is here. Cool. Right, so should now be able to see Logic. I'll try to avoid clapping. I'll play some music. Right, so let me know if you can hear it. Okay, so testing before we start. 10 minutes in. If you've tuned in already, bear with me a minute. A lot of tech stuff to work. Right, that's enough of that. Hopefully you can hear that. I'm just waiting for that to be confirmed. I need to turn that off. I can see the comment as well. Perfect. All working so far. Let's take display capture off again and put my image back up, and face cam's gonna be underneath, so oh god. Let's put that in the corner. How cool is that? Okay. Sweet. Can hear the song, can hear everything, perfect. Just check and see this. Make that big again. Cover up my face. No one wants to see that.
face cam underneath, so. Oh god. Let's put that in the corner. How cool is that?
Right. Okay. I think apart from the lag, everything's working as it should be. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's not too bad. If it gets really bad, I've got guys to help me or to let me know what's going on, so I can try and fix it. But we'll be starting in 5 minutes. I'll get this on the roll. I'll get rid of uncover my face, and then we'll go from there. Oh God. Move this out of the way. So you can see it's me. Other way, mirror's flipped. Yeah. Make that smaller. There we go. You can see now. Should be able to put my voice. Two seconds. Okay, we're going to start. There's a bit of a delay on, so we might not start exactly at 6 o'clock because I don't know exactly how much the delay's going by. So we're just going to start, and eventually you guys should start seeing what I'm doing. So, this live stream is going to be relatively short, but just to discuss a few techniques I've done with my production of Hit the Road Jack, a piece I've had to do for university. With that, what I'm going to do is, I've got my little notes to show me what we're doing and what I'm talking about, because I will probably forget. First off, microphone technique. So with this, it's a punk rock cover of Hit the Road Jack, a very famous piece. And with that, I had to make sure that with my production, it had some sort of reference back to the original track, but at the same time wanted it to be something new, something different, energetic. So what we'll do first is we're going to listen to a bit of the track, and then we'll come back and discuss things that I did to make it what it is. Okay, so give me a second while I set this up, and then we'll go from there. Don't need that anymore. Let's get rid of my camera because we don't need to see that. And then display capture, and let's go to the Logic file here. All right, so enjoy.
Jack, don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, don't you come back no more. Oh woman, oh you treat me so mean. You're the meanest woman that I've ever seen. But I guess if you say so, I better pack my things and go. Hit the road, Jack, don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, don't you come back no more. 1, 2, 3, yo! Why'd you treat me this way? You know I'll be back on my feet someday. But I guess if you say it's so, I better pack my things and go. Hit the road, Jack, don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, don't you come back no more. Oh! Jack, hit the road, Jack, hit the road, Jack. Hit the road, Jack, hit the road, Jack, hit the road, Jack, hit the road, Jack.
Okay, that's that. Right, let me put my face cam back on. Let's get rid of that, because that gets confusing. You see, like, mirrors. That is the song. Hope you enjoyed it. Fingers crossed you can hear it. Yep, that's good. I've just been confirmed on my end that that's all coming through fine, so that's perfect. First off, microphones. So with this, I actually, because I'm a student, and most students probably will realise we're broke, I didn't have many microphones to work with. There was a pair that I did splash out on a little bit because I think they were really worth it, but we'll get into that in a second. So I actually used four kinds of different microphone here, or four different microphones, and I'll just go run you through which ones I used, so that to see what's going on. So first off, the famous, or infamous, I should say, SM57. You can see that. Where's the camera? There it is. So these are found literally everywhere in music. There's the camera. And they are dynamic microphones, so they're really good for intense sound and close-up miking, especially on drums and guitars, or guitar amps. So with this, I use this on the snare and the tom, as well as the hi-hat for this track, which came through quite well. I thought I was quite happy with the results after the recording. So yeah, handy, very handy microphones. Only about 90 quid, so they're actually quite cheap, but they are used everywhere. They're used a lot in live sound as well, because they're just generally quite durable. So that's one. I used an Audix D6. This was purely for the kick drum on the drum kit. These are really good for low frequency, but at the same time, it's also a dynamic microphone, so it still has that durability and that great response for high intense sound at a close level. Because of the way they work, which if you look in online, the easy way to describe it is there's a big spring or coil inside the microphone that needs, obviously, sound being vibrations to hit that spring to vibrate to cause then electrical signal which goes into the computer, into the mixer, and that's what generates the waveform. So yeah, that's how dynamic microphone works, and this one in particular is great for kick drum. I always get a nice powerful kick. Of course, on all of the tracks, I have done a layer of lots of effects, which I'll get to later, which enhance the sound. But like with any mix, the starting point is a good recording. So these are great. Would recommend the Audix D6. I'll finish off with the rest of the final thing for the drum kit. So I also bought these. Now these are the ones that I kind of splashed out a little bit on. This is a Rhodes NT5, and I actually have a matched pair of these, meaning that when I bought the two that I bought were built at the exact same time, so they should be like twins, effectively, making them nice and reliable for that stereo image sound. Because I have two. These were used for an overhead on a drum kit, so they're sat actually above, or they're placed above the drum kit. Imagine the kit being here, one on the well, for me the right, for you the left, and the end on the other side, and that gives a nice overall image of the drums. And then the other mics that are close mic'd give an accurate sound for that. They give a close miking sound for that individual instrument, which will then pair up later. Finally, I have this one. This is kind of a budget mic as well. It's a still Rode. It's a Rode NT1A. This is a condenser microphone used for vocals. Actually, if I can get it lined up, you can actually see in the camera, the actual capsule inside the wire frame. But these are good for. I'm trying to move that to the side of the way. That's not going to happen, is it? No. Okay, fine. These are used for vocals, really, or anything that, because the way these work. These are a condenser microphone. They're a much more sensitive mic. They pick up a lot more frequencies a lot easier. So you need to have it way a bit lower in the mix, because they pick up a lot. This is a good one to start with, and when you buy it, they normally come in a pack with all sorts of things that you can use, because it normally sits in a cradle like that, facing forward where this little dot is. So yeah, these are really cool. And I use this for vocals, combined actually with a 57, and I'll go into the reason why I use both a little bit later on in the stream. But interesting results. So that's microphones done, really. If you want any more information about them, just visit the website. So either Shure, Rhodes, or Audix, and then you can learn a lot about the microphones, and actually you get like the full specs list on their websites. Right, looking at my notes, what's next? Production methods. All right, we can go to the track now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my face cam. We'll go on to looking at the actual mix itself, and I'll discuss what I did. So 2 seconds whilst I set this up. Let's get rid of that. Let's put that back on, and let's go here. So, as you heard, the first couple of bars, or I'd say the first section of this song, is a callback to the original. That is because I really wanted to have this idea of it being recorded in the way that it would have been originally, only for this first section. So every track I have then sent into one reverb, which then gave the idea that all of these sounds were coming from one place in a big, big room, much like the original recording would have been done. So I hope that comes across quite well. I'm quite happy with it so far. As any production student will tell you, you're never actually truly finished with a track. So I'm always constantly tweaking it. But I'll show you what I did. So if I bring up the mixer here, and then let's make this as big as I can so I can show you. This is where it gets a bit complicated. If I go right to the left, all the way to the end, that's where I've put all of my vintage, I've named it, or my old school sounds. And then what I've done, as you can see, is on the output here, they're all going to bus 11. Except for these two, which I believe was... Oh, that's because I wanted them to stand out a little bit more. But I've kept them quite low. If you go to bus 11 now, along the top here, which would be right towards the end, here, you can see I have labelled this Vintage Drums. Okay, so where is... I'm trying to remind myself how I did this now. 2 seconds. Vintage Drums, and then let's go for bus 1, which is... Okay, yeah, got it. So yeah, I've sent all the drums into one place, and then I've sent everything in that beginning section into this group, into this bus here, called Vintage Verb or Vintage Verb with Vintage Reverb. This is so everything is going through this one reverb chamber, making it sound like it's all glued together in one place. If I was to solo this and then just play this, all you're going to hear on its own is the reverb of the room. So I'll play that now for you. There we are. So yeah, that is just the reverb. When you then match that with the original tracks, that gives that gives you a subtle idea of reverb. Because I've sent them all through this and they have to go through this without any other kind of help, all we're getting is that space design. And then with the reverb itself, in the plugin, I have made sure that it's still primarily dry. It's a minus 7.4 dB dry signal compared to a minus 24 wet signal. Now, if you're not familiar with these terms, effectively, what I've done is by grouping all of the tracks, all of the instruments together and putting them through this plugin here that I've just opened up. It affects all of the instruments in the same way. They all have the same level of reverb on them, and then the dry signal is how much reverb. So how much of the original recording is being put through, and the wet signal is how much the reverb's affecting it. So by having the dry signal higher, it means I'm still going to get the clear sound more than the reverb, but the reverb's still having a heavy effect on the track. So yeah, it gives that illusion of it being recorded in a big swing room, much like the original recording would have been done. Now, moving on from that, we then get to the main piece, which is the punk rock track. This was a lot of fun to mix, and as you can probably see on the screen right now, there is a lot of different plugins and sends I've done. So I've affected all the drums individually, but for this streams, because this to not get completely carried away with what I'm talking about, I've given myself a few rules of what to talk about, and hopefully not to go too detailed if need be. So, first off, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I've used buses. Now, buses are a way for you to group and send audio tracks into one channel. So, for example, to demonstrate this, in the red down here, if I highlight them for you, here, they are the drum tracks. They are every single drum instrument I've recorded. So I've got a kick drum, a snare, hi-hat, floor, tom, and then overhead left and right. With that, I have sent all of these into a drum bus minus the kick. And the reason why I did that was because I wanted the kick to stand out a little bit more instead of just blending in with the rest of the drums. However, so from the snare to the overhead's right, so all of these channels are going into this bus here, which I've highlighted, called drum. or drum bus is what it is. What this does is it then puts all of the instruments into one channel where I can affect them all equally, which kind of glues them together. Because even though I've used different microphones for different sections of the drum, I can still affect them and I can still treat them in the same way. They can blend nicely together. So with that, before you send them into that group, you can actually treat each drum individually first. What this does means once they've all gone through that treatment and then been sent to the bus, they're in a good place to be glued together. So what I've done, it's up here you can see, all of the blue boxes here. Again, if you're not familiar with Logic as a DAW, as a digital workshop, then I'll try and go through so you can understand what's going on. If you are familiar with Logic, this may seem a little bit tedious at first, but I'll try and go into some more advanced things later on. But I have to set the groundwork first. So, the blue boxes here, channel EQ. This is one of the settings you can do in Logic, and what EQ does is effectively gives you control over the frequencies in each recording, meaning you can control exactly what's going on, what we hear from each microphone, and if there's any annoying bumps or clicks or high-pitched squeals or scrapes, you can then try and take that out with EQ. So I won't go into the detail of all of them, but one I think gives a clear example of what's going on is the kick EQ. With that, if I open it up, we see this. Now, what I've done, so from left to right in this plugin, so left is low frequency, and right will be the higher frequencies, up to 20,000 kilohertz, I think, 20,000 hertz. So yeah, with that, the kick drum being a low frequency instrument, which I've used the Audix D6 for, as I mentioned earlier, I'm tailoring a lot of stuff from 20 hertz all the way up to about 500. And what I've done here is I've actually given it a nice crisp sort of a boost in that frequency, but I'm taking away some of the sub and some of the 500 hertz, meaning that we're not going to get like a muddy sound. I can talk about this all day, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you with and without the EQ, and hopefully you can hear the difference if I've done my job right. So let's try that now. So first off, I'm going to take the EQ off. Let's close that down for a second, and let's find a section where we can hear the drums clearly. Here we go, and then I'm just going to solo the kick. So I'll solo the kick and snare, so we've got a little bit of a rhythm going, and then we'll go from there. So this is this is going to be without the EQ first, remember, and then I'll play the same section again with EQ, and hopefully, like I said, if I've done my job right, you should be able to hear a difference. So here we go. Okay, so that was about. Let's put EQ back on now, and let's see what you can hear. So, here we go. There we are, so an audible difference there. We can definitely hear, with the EQ on, it gives a much crisp, like a much more precise, punchy hit for the kick drum, which then keeps that rhythm going. It keeps that steady beat for the rest of the track, which is great. That's what we need. Another thing I've done with the drum kit, seeing as we're on the subject of drums, is once you can, with the EQ, that filters out the unwanted frequencies and gives a nice clean sound. If the frequency or the what I'm left with isn't strong enough, or I feel like it's lacking something, you can then add something onto it called compression. Now, what compression does is it's a plugin that squashes. So with any recording, you have the loud hits and the quiet hits. If you have a very good musician, hopefully it's nice and steady. But if you're not as confident in the studio, then you may find that some points are louder than others, and it's very difficult to mix. So what a compressor does is it squashes those points. It brings the loudest point and the loudest point and the quietest point closer together, making it a much more consistent sound. And the overall effect that gives is it makes it sound louder. So what I've done for the snare, because the snare needs to have that loud, consistent punch to it, again, like the kick drum, keeping the rhythm afloat during the track. What I've done for the snare is I've added a compressor on. Now this is Logic's own compressor, it's just their own plugin. I've currently got the Platinum Digital Setup on, With that, I've got these little settings here. Now, again, if you're not familiar with Logic or with compression at all, instead of me telling you exactly what I've done on screen, first off, I'm going to just show you what the difference is. So once again, I'm going to turn that off. Let's get rid of that for a second. Let's put that same loop on. I think there's a snare. Yeah, there's a snare in there. Perfect. So let's loop that. So compression's off. I'm going to solo the snare and the kick drum, so we've got that rhythm. And let's see if you can hear a difference. So here we go. Okay, and now compression on. There we are. So yeah, much louder, much more present in the mix. By making it louder, it gives a bit more of an intimate feel, brings it closer to you, so it's much more prominent inside in the track. So that is EQ and compression. Once you've gone through all of that with every track on the drums and you've treated it nicely and you're happy with everything you've got, you then look at the drum bus. Now, with the drum bus, which I've highlighted here, I've added a second compression. So anything that I've put compression on, mainly the snare in this track, is then going to go through another compressor. Now, what that does is it takes all of the drum tracks and adds the same level of compression, making it all nice and close together. In a way, it kind of glues it. Considering how I've mic'd up and it's quite common to mic up every drum separately, you need a way of kind of sticking it back together so it's all going to be one instrument, one section of the song. So yeah, a second compressor is always good. Same thing, it just squashes the lows and the high levels of the track into a much more steady and consistent waveform. Great. The EQ, I've done a general EQ over that, just taking out some of the high ends there, as well as a ringing that I found in the snare, which I'll show you here. So this peak here, this level here, around 7,200 hertz. That was like a ringing snare sound that I turned to locate. So I can't take it out completely, but with the EQ, I've managed to pinpoint exactly where it's ringing the most and to bring that down, so it's not so harsh in the ear. So yeah, that's all I've done for the EQ there, keeping it nice and clear, but at the same time natural. I don't want to affect it too much because this is a punk track. It needs to be authentic, needs to be real, to an extent anyway. Of course, with all this, it's not efficiently real, but it works. So that's that. Once I've done all that, the next thing for my drums that I always do, is to get some reverb on it, to put it in a space, because any recording you hear, there's going to be some form of reverb, some sort of acoustic space. Now, what reverb does is it gives that space artificially. So that's why, ideally, a studio should be as quiet as possible and as dry as possible. If we go back to that term I used earlier, dry being a reliable, clean sound, and wet being a heavily affected sound. So, with all the drum tracks here that I'll highlight, I've sent them to, let me just check this one, bus, where is it? 8. So I've sent the snare, hold on. Yeah, I've sent the snare, hi-hat, tom, overhead left and right to a bus 8, which is going to be a reverb chamber. The only ones I haven't sent across yet is the additional one for the snare, which I'll get to in a second, and the kick. Now this could be because I wanted them to stand out a bit more. Possibly that I haven't finished tweaking it yet. That I'm not too sure. But anyway, I'll explain what I've done with the bus. So in bus 8, if I find it here, which I'll then highlight here, that, much like the vintage reverb chamber or room that I've made for the beginning section, I've created a bus just for reverb. What that does is then if I solo this and play it, again, all you hear is the drum room, just the room that it creates. Now, if I had, like the vintage section, if I had that all going through this channel, this bus, without any other route of take, then that would make a very quiet, a very distant sound for the drums, which is not what I want. So instead of routing it so that they have to go through the bus, I've sent a portion of the tracks to that bus. Now what that means is that the originals the original recordings that go through here, which I've highlighted, the drum bus, are going to the main output, so you will hear them, and if there's no other way they go, but you'll also hear the reverb with that. So it's actually it's called the technique's called parallel mixing, which is where you put one track of the same thing next to each other, but you can affect them differently, and that causes different effects and different kind of production. So by having the reverb channel at a lower volume, parallel with the original drum track, I'm getting a sound of a drum room, but at the same time, I'm not losing the impact the drums are actually giving, which is what I was looking for. It's perfect. This is actually a technique used with old school production. Originally, obviously, with all these days, we have so many plugins and effects and technology that we can use to artificially create these sounds. With the old days, what they'd actually have to do is send the recordings into a massive room, a reverb chamber, which would then create the sound naturally, and then they would record that sound and bring it back into the studio, and then do what I'm doing, which is where they play that reverb sound, that acoustic sound of the room, alongside the dry track to create that space. So what I'm doing is kind of artificially creating the old school method of production, which, considering this is a cover of a much older track, works really well. And personally, the way my brain works, I prefer this method of production. So yeah, that's enough about drums for now. Let's see what else I can talk about. So let's go towards the. Let's have a look at the vocals. Why not? So with the vocals, I've done a similar thing, and that is that I've mixed it parallel with a distortion track. So because of the way these vocals are recorded and the way this song needs them to be, I have produced them in a way that's probably not as commonly recognized. Well, yeah, not that I would say is the go-to. So instead of using a nice microphone with a really nice clear sound, picking up all the frequencies I need for a vocal, instead I've gone for something completely different. I've used an SM57, the microphone I've used for drum recording. Now, the reason why I've done this is because in this particular track, the lead singer's vocals aren't really about melody, well, as much as about melody and that smooth line through the song that you hear with a lot of pop tracks these days and jazz and that sort of thing. Instead, it's punk, so it's power, it's aggression, it's energy. So the way I've done that is I've put a 57, a microphone typically used because it's good, particularly used for drum recording and close mic recording because it needs more vibration, more intensity, more volume to trigger the higher frequencies. And I've used that as a vocal mic because, say, towards the end of the song, which I'll play a little bit later in a second, there's a lot more aggression, shouting, and energy. It needs that sound. And because it's not that high of a, hasn't got that frequency response rate, it gives this illusion of punk. You know, it's not crystal clear vocal. It's dirty. It's sort of like lower down. Authentic, I would say, is kind of the word that punk throws around a lot, where it's all real, it's all thing, but it's a nice way for the vocals to be in punk, despite the fact it's not as clear as it could be. It's not a million, or it's not like a £3,000 mic. It's 90 quid. So it just matches the image really. Anyway, and then to match the aggression, the energy this vocal's giving, I've done the same thing I've done for reverb, and I've made a parallel bus here. So I've sent the vocals into this bus, where I've added a pedal board, commonly used for a guitar, but I've added distortion onto that pedal board. So here's vocals, which I'll play now for you. If I just solo this, the distortion, you're going to hear is a very, very fuzzy, distorted vocal track, which let me find a different point in the song here where we can hear it properly. Let me have a little look. Okay, so let's play here. Okay, see what you can hear.
Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, Jack, and don't you come back no more.
Okay, so yeah, with the vocal distortion on its own, it sounds a bit horrible, really. Again, it's all faded. You can't hear much. It's just pure distortion at a low level, which, yeah, on its own, not ideal. However, if I now play the same thing again, but I add the vocal track in, the main vocal track, you should hear a noticeable difference. So let's try that again now, shall we?
Head to road, Jack, and don't you come back